everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 13 of season 2 of Vinland Saga. So, yeah, everything's been going great for Thorfinn, so why not muck it up? Because that's exactly what's gonna happen. Kettle, oh, poor Olmar. Olmar, he was so proud, wanted to go to war, and then got a taste of what it was gonna be like being in actual battle, and things didn't go great for Olmar. We'll talk about him in the comments here in just a second, but luckily, old Lucky Leaf was there, and he scooped up Kettle, Thorgil, and Olmar and helped him back home along with Bug Eyes. So, the good news is that hopefully Leaf will be able to reconnect with Thorfinn, who he hasn't seen, like has been chasing down for nearly 2 decades. We'll finally get to see him, so that's the hope. And then Kettle and all of them will get to go back to their farm. The bad news is that Canute has decided to claim that farm as his own, and so this wonderful freedom that has been promised to Einar and Thorfinn, I'm not going to say Canute's probably not going to let that happen. He's probably going to be like, nah, not want to let them go free. And they're going to probably go to the farm and try to subjugate it. And I'm really concerned about Leaf and Sverkel because they're the 2 old guys. And I'm like, if Leaf dies, I don't know. Just like, what will we do? So I do want to talk about a couple comments from some people before we dive into this episode. I'm pretty excited. It's episode 13. I'm going to say that we're going to start a new core because we've technically gone through everything we could possibly go through the core. We're past the halfway point. I feel we're going to get a new OP, new ED, which is kind of sad because I just got the first OP and ED stuck in my head. Now I'm not going to have it in my head anymore. So, But I have two people's comments that I want to talk about before we start this episode. One is from Alexander Q that talks about how Canute's fight with Wolf back in episode 11 shows the men around him that a king can press forward not only with brute strength alone, but also through cunning and trickery. Yeah, the whole fight with Wolf is a very good metaphor of Canute's way of fighting. Canute's not really the type to like slash his way through things like Thorkel and Thorgil. He's more like, I'm going to poison you and trick you, and I'm going to defeat you that way. But it shows his men that there's more than one way to win a fight. And I thought about Alexander Q's comment and thought, yes, Canute is showing that to those men, but also it's kind of interesting because you can kind of connect that to Thorfinn in a way, where Canute's showing that there's more than one way to win a fight. It's not just by brute strength. And then Thorfinn takes that even a step further and says, do we even need violence at all to solve a conflict? And it's like, so it just takes it a step further, right? But I will admit, I had a lot of fun with Sasha's comment as well. Sasha was talking about the Thorfinn and Canute both staring in opposite directions into the sunset. It was giving me like Star Wars Padme Anakin vibes, and I'll let you figure out who's Padme and who's Anakin, but it was giving Jujutsu Kaisen movie Zero Gojo Ghetto vibes. Very much so. And I was like, oh, interesting. But it's very cinematic, so poetic. It's like poetry, right? But Sasha also brought up some callbacks from earlier on in season 2, saying, in the last episode, Wolf said, well, we have 102 men going to Kettle's farm. And back in episode 6 of season 2, just half the episodes ago, Snake was like, well, they only need 50 or 60 men to take this place. And they're bringing double that, so great. So there's that. And also there's kind of the idea that Sverkel said having too much money is a bad thing, and Kettle's kind of like reaping what he's sowing, right? He's having all this money, and now Canute's like, ooh, I want it. And so it's leading to something very bad happening. But beyond that, I really like Sasha's comment about Thorgil, because Sasha brought up the fact that Thorgil, despite being like terrifying and how violent he is and how much he glorifies it and like soaks it in, Thorgil is actually a pretty good brother. Because other than the string of ears, which again ties to his old glorifying violence thing, Thorgil he doesn't get onto his brother. He doesn't make fun of his brother. He doesn't, like the fact that Olmar couldn't hit the pig, he doesn't make fun of him for it or belittle him because of it. He looks out for his brother, and I kind of like that. I respect Thorgil in the sense that he does care for his brother. Of course, Thorgil seems to have this idea of how the world works. He's a traditional Viking warrior through and through. And he has these ideas of how he believes his father is, even though we know that that's not the case. And he has ideas of what his brother, or what he thinks his brother wants. Like Olmar's talked about wanting to go to war and becoming a man and being violent. And so Thorgal, he's trying to get Olmar to that place. The problem is, once Olmar got to that place, rather than glorifying it and just reveling in it like Thorgal does, he realized, oh, this is bad, and just kind of retreated into his shell like, why did I do this? And had the exact opposite reaction. So it's fascinating to see these two brothers and this father who all have very similar and different personality, identities, moralities, all circling around them, kind of thrust into this situation, because you can see that you could pick out that each of them is going to try to deal with this situation in a different way. And how that's going to gel with Einar and Thorfinn is going to be interesting. How it's going to gel with the snake still back on the farm, as well as Sverkel. So how is this all going to go down? We're going to see, right? But it's like the sun was setting, and it's like, oh, the sun is setting on the halcyon days. Like everything was great, and Thorfinn's been having a good time, and all I can tell myself is that show, no matter what you do to Thorfinn, I will have those episodes where he was smiling. I can look back on those. You can't take that away from me. But I'm so curious to know if Canute is going to Kettle's farm and meets up with Thorfinn. What do we do with that? How does that even go down? Like if Leaf shows up with bug eyes, how does that go down? So I'm so excited and intrigued to know how is this going to work. And I can't wait. So yeah, I'm really excited, y'all. I hope you all are too, but we are not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into this episode and just see what we get. All right. So new OP, new ED, new trauma. But we are going to find out and look at episode 13 of season 2 of Vinland Saga. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, I feel bad for Einar. Oh no! Oh man, well Einar, the problem is you're just her type. You didn't get there first. Oh no! Hey, on the one hand, I feel really bad for Einar because unrequited love is a bitch. And I'm like, the moment we figured out that redheaded guy was from the present timeline, I'm like, oh, he's coming after Arnheid. And then I was like, oh no, so that means, and you could either look at it two ways. It's either Arnheid really, loves him, which she does. She came out and called for him. If she didn't, here's the thing. I had all these ideas of this guy right from the beginning. I thought it was Sverkel. I thought this was a flashback. I thought we were getting a flashback arc before we start this season. I had all these ideas in my head before the OP and was like, oh, well, never mind. So we'll go back and check this out, right? Of what's going on here. But Gardar. We'll put him here. Gardar. Oh, Gar. He's there. Gar and Arnheid. Of course they're married. They were married and separated through slavery, and now he's got back out and has gone to find her. The moment we found out it was the present timeline, he was going after Arnheid, I thought, well, it's going to be either one of two scenarios. Either they were together and it was like an abusive relationship and it was really bad, and she's glad she's gotten away from him and he's coming to get her, and she's going to be like, oh no, I don't want you near me. Or they were in a really loving relationship and then suddenly they're separated and she's like, oh, you're back. And it's the latter. And either way, it's bad for Einar. Either way, it's like, oh no. I got Huckleberry's toy here. And so he basically, they were separated as slaves. That puts a whole nother layer on the whole situation where the mistress was trying to suggest that Arnheid marry Einar. That puts a whole nother layer to it, because I wondered that. I was all these years, over 3 years, and Arnheid never made a move on Einar, never tried to do anything. I'm like, Einar's a catch. She's a good guy, right? And so I was like, why wouldn't she try to make a move? Was it because she was in a situation where she was with Kettle and she didn't want to jeopardize, her safety or Einar's safety or anything like that? I had just chalked it off as that. But the reality is, not only that, but she was married and loved someone else. and was like, I'm not going to be unfaithful to, which she had to be, she was forced, to sit with Kettle. That adds another layer to it that, this, I'm sure that Gardar, he looks like he would just, slay Kettle if he could, if he knew that another man was sleeping with his wife against her will. I'm sure that adds another layer to it. But they were separated as slaves. And then he's gone to get her to run away. So, we're going to talk about this in this episode. There's a lot of stuff going on in this episode. Again, this is a setup episode. There's lots of setup, but there's lots of little things behind the scenes. And I'm like, okay, we're setting up. I was like, okay, we're setting this whole second corps up for Canute to come and invade. Well, now we've just added a whole other layer to it. A whole other layer. This with this Gardar guy. Right, so let's talk about this episode. We have the tapestry. The tapestry. I love that it's this idea of this multimodal form of communication where a lot of times in many cultures, the use of tapestries, of beadwork, of fabrics, they're used to, as communication. They're used to tell stories. There's lots of Native American tribes that do that. There are lots of indigenous tribes that do that as well, that they use tapestry and textures to be a form of narrative. And they take the place of words and language. Because that's kind of thing we learned, in school, is the idea that if you want to kill a culture, kill its language. Because that's how they communicate. If a culture can't communicate, they can't talk to one another, they can't fight back, they can't organize, then you've completely subjugated them. And so a lot of times through history, cultures will be destroyed and languages will be destroyed in the sake of making people into slaves or subjugating them. So I like the idea that we start out this episode with a tapestry that is telling a story and it's on fire. Right? I love that. And the funny thing of it is that the tapestry is not of the subjugated, it's not of the oppressed culture, it is of the ruling class in this situation that gets completely overturned. But yeah, so these opening shots tell a story, right? Dark clouds. Oh my God, these opening shots tell a story. There's the pot with the food that's been overturned, the fire there is getting onto the tapestry. You see the people on horses, you see the wheat, you see the people with plows, you see people moving the carts like slaves, you see children, you see all of that on the tapestry there. And then we cut to like a kid crying and there's this mom like hovered over him trying to like protect him. Okay. And then there's the head of the sons. So the sons, the head. And there's another one of the sons that was just killed there too, right? And another one that was burned in the fire. Oh my God. And then you see in the tapestry the two sides at war against one another, right? And that's essentially what's happening here. And then this man. What's interesting is that Gardar does not kill the woman or child. He spares them. Which makes me think that he's thinking of Arnheid, which that does say a lot of his character, right? We're going to put that down here, that he killed the master and his sons, but he spared the wife and child. And we saw that at least one of the sons had a weapon, so they were fighting back against him, but he spared the wife and kid. I think that in itself says a lot of Gardar's character, because I think from the get-go we're supposed to not like Gardar for numbers of reasons. One, because he seems violent. He's on the run. They frame him as dangerous, although Fox and Badger and Lizard are idiots. He's framed as being dangerous, and they're like, oh, he's this dangerous person, we can't trust him. And he shows up with, and Arnheid, who we've been rooting to get with Einar, he shows back up and is like, oh, my wife. And it's like, oh no, now Arnheid is gonna go with him, and Einar's stuck back with Thorfinn. Oh no. Oh no! I guess I'll just have to ship Thorfinn and Einar again. Oh, woe is me. But we're meant to frame it. The story tries to trick us. It's meant to frame, I think the story is trying to trick us, to frame Gardar as a bad person, but just the act in itself of sparing the wife and child, I think sets him far apart from the Vikings, who, as we've established, the Vikings just take women and kids and sell and rape them and do whatever they want with them and have no regard towards them as people. And Gardar spares her and the child and leaves them there. So I feel like that says mountains for his character already, in that he is not like the Viking warriors. He is not like the Danes. He is different. So, and he's maybe not as villainous of a character as we are making him out to be. Now, watch next episode. I put my foot in my mouth and be completely wrong about him, but that's just the impression that I get of him right now. And he's pissed. I love the shot of him with the sword and the shackles around his hands and the sword. Oh, it's good. That's such a good visual. And then, yeah, the dad, the master, we'll get his name. He has a weird name. But yeah, him standing up. And then, yeah, the wife and kid are in the corner. Mm-hmm. And then he chases the master out of the house and he falls down the stairs. But he doesn't have a leg. He's missing a leg, so he can't run very far. So he's out there. I love the fire behind him. Oh, it's great. And then eclipsing him. And yeah, our very first look at Gardar. He looks a lot like Einar, which is very unfortunate for Einar. It's like, dude, if this guy hadn't shown up, you might have had a chance, but maybe not. I think that's the thing. Arnie does not strike me as an unfaithful person, so you probably didn't have a chance. But man, Einar just can't catch a break. Cannot catch a break, can he? Damn it. And so, yeah, this man, just seething with rage, right? And you can see like the marks on his hand from the shackles. Like you can see the wrist cuts and everything and the scars. Because it's been at least 3 years. At least 3 years that we know of that he's been separated from Arnheid. And that's probably longer. It's probably been 5 or 6 years, right? And the master says, I was wrong. He says, I'll release you. I swear to Odin that I will. And he pulls the knife like from his ribs, like he's been stabbed, right? So he's injured. So he's cornered and injured, right? And Snake makes the point of saying that a cornered man is a dangerous man. Like when you're cornered and have nothing to lose, that's a problem because chances are you'll do something really drastic and rash. And if you're strong, that's even worse because you'll probably succeed with it. So Snake's like, we gotta proceed with caution. He's like, money, I'll give you money. And Gardar doesn't seem to want money or anything. He wants his wife. He wants not to be a slave anymore. And so him looking down, he says, that's not enough. He's like, it'll take more than that to wipe away the insults I've suffered until today. So, Gardar did not have a Pleasantville experience of slavery like Einar and Thorfinn had. And I say that, to add some levity to the episode because it's a pretty dark episode. But in all honesty, Kettle, for the situation as it were, Kettle was not the worst person that could be the slave master of Einar and Thorfinn. The situation's still bad. It's slavery. But Kettle's not the worst person imaginable. Like, this guy seems to be a lot worse. And Gardar's like, Gardar had enough. And was like, and we're done. So he says that it's not that money and power, it won't cover the insult of slavery. He's like, you made me feel like less than a person. He's like, you think you can pay me and make me feel better? Which is interesting because the way that we'll put Thorfinn and Einar over here. I'm going to put Thorfinn by himself. Thorfinn gets a special little spot here. And we're going to put Einar over here. We'll put Einar here. But the idea of freedom and where to go, what to do. Yeah, because Kettle, we joked about it at the beginning of the season. It's like, oh yeah, well they're given their freedom, but they have no place to go. So more than likely they're going to stay and work for Kettle. So is it true freedom? Is it really, is it freedom when you were drugged from your home against your will and suddenly taken to a place where you don't really have any other place to go and you're stuck there forever because you don't know what to do otherwise? Is that freedom? But Einar and Thorfinn seem to kind of have maybe not accepted it, but are trying to make the best of the situation. Whereas Gardar seems like he's like, no, this is hell and I hate this. And I've been insulted my entire life. Like he's just so over it, right? It's just fueled with rage. He just can't take it. And then he's like, you try being a slave for once. He's like, you won't understand the depths of my rage otherwise. He's like, you made me work against my will, away from my wife, who I love. You took my life from me. We don't know if him and Arnheid had kids. We have no clue. Like that's the thing. In slavery, especially like, you know, any historical event, like families were separated, like kids were sent off, wives and husbands were separated. Like it's like, we don't know if they have kids. We don't know anything about that. And that brings up a really good point. We know nothing about Arnheid, and she has said practically nothing about her life. Probably because it hurts too much. She doesn't want to bring it up. So, but Gardar is like, you have no idea how angry I am and how much rage I have built up inside of me, and now it's just spewing out, right? Now it's just spewing out. I love that shot when he lifts his hand up, right? It's great. But, I'm going to get a picture of it. Yeah, I thought this was, we'll talk about my crazy theory about Sverkel. I had like a whole theory planned, like thought up from the first couple minutes of this. And then the moment we find out that this is happening like in the present, I was like, oh, well, forget that. But here's the thing. The one guy, he goes, okay. He says, sure. He's like, I'll become your slave. Yeah, sure. I'll serve you. Like it's nothing. Like being a slave is something that it's like playing out. So it's like playing house. Like being slaves, like, okay, well, it's my turn. Tag, I'm in it. Like it's that easy. Like that's such an insult to Gardar, is that he views slavery as such a, just not even a thing, that he's like, oh, well, sure, I'll just do it. It'll be fine, right? I'm like, that is the last thing you should have said, sir. The last thing you should have said. Because he's like, oh, so you're saying that your life is in my hands, right? And then he just kills him. Whether you live or die is up to me. And then, yeah. And so then we see the sword, the sword that has like the blood over it, has like all these like ribbons and stuff in gold. And it's stuck through the master. And then there's the woman there. But the thing of it is, she doesn't even look like maybe the mistress or anything. She looks like a slave that was made to have like either the slave master's kid or like one of his son's kids. She doesn't even look like that's hers. Because at first I thought maybe she was with Gardar and maybe he would like rescued her and the baby. But the fact of the matter is that he just freed her and then he left. It's been a long time. Now I must go get her. Yeah, and that point it was like, okay. So, and then he just leaves the burning house behind, right? Okay, so my long-winded theory, in short, was when we first saw him come up, because I saw the red hair, and I was like, well, Omar has red hair, so I forgot what color of eyes Sverkel had, so the guy having blue eyes and Sverkel having brown eyes, I forgot what color of eyes Sverkel had. Sue me. So I had this thought in my head as soon as we saw like the red hair and stuff. I'm like, oh, cool. Maybe this is because we saw the sword hanging up and Sverkel had talked about how, you know, he earned this land. He earned everything that he had. He earned the farm. It was his. I had this big theory pop up in my head, and I've had this theory for a while that maybe Sverkel was once a slave because he seems to relate a lot to Thorfinn, so who is a slave right now. So I've had a theory in my head a long time that Sverkel might have been a slave himself who earned his freedom somehow and built this farm up for himself, and he was very proud of that. That was like his freedom was having this farm that was his own, that he didn't owe anything to anyone for. And so when we saw this guy show up with the shackles on and the sword, I'm like, oh, well, that's Sverkel. And this is the story of how he freed himself, started a new life. That woman was like holding baby Kettle, and like that was going to be the thing. I was so convinced. So I had this whole backstory about Sverkel and baby Kettle all planned out, and then no, that's not it at all. Never mind. So if you were wondering why I was all like that, that's why. But this OP is great. It feels very much like the OP from season 1. Feels very much like the second OP. Getting a little edginess to it. I like it. I have a feeling I'm going to be going back through the imagery every week, so I won't get too crazy, but the idea of Thorfinn being represented as the bundle of sticks that's being carried to the funeral pyre. Oh, that is great. And he's watching over, and then we have like the flowers, snake reading to Sverkel, the butterflies, and then of course Einar. Of course Einar looking at Arnheid. So sad, and she's like spinning around. And then so there's this man with the baby that I'm assuming might be Gardar from the past, so maybe they did have a kid. I don't know. Also, my favorite image of the whole damn OP, though, is that shot of Canute's head, and then, like, his father's head is nudgingly, like, embracing him, like just, like, nuzzling his neck. Oh, it's so good. I love that shot. That's my favorite shot of the whole damn OP, is just Canute, like, snuggling with his father's decapitated head. It's so good. It's so good. I love it. And it whispering to him, and the flowers on the bundle of sticks, right? And so we have Gardar, we have all the butterflies. Like, the butterflies, what's interesting is the butterflies, like, fly out from this character with the helmet on. I'm like, is that Thorfinn with the helmet? Who is that? But they have blue eyes, so I'm guessing it's Canute, right, with the helmet, and then the sword and the blood, and then the mountain of bodies and snake, everything. There's a lot going on in this second half. I'm like, okay, Survive said the Prophet. Okay, they're the ones who did the OP for season 1. Good. And then them all, like, just stabbing the spears into the stick man that is supposed to be Thorfinn represented. And then Kettle. Olmar praying is interesting. Like, is Olmar going to have a spiritual awakening from his experiences? Is that going to be the case? And then pouring out the water and it becomes blood. Ooh. And then Thorgil fighting. Yep. And then there's a kid with a baby. And then there's Arnheid holding, looks like Gardar. And then there's someone with a kid. Okay. And there's heads rolling. Like, there's so much. So we're going to get backstory with Gardar at some point, right? I'm going to imagine they had a child and maybe the child was killed when they were taken away and became slaves. I'm going to guess. Possibly. But yeah, and then the stick man getting stuck with the spears is Thorfinn, right? With the dead bodies surrounding him and the chasm. So yeah, Thorfinn is going to have to deal with, what do you deal with war? How, if you're trying to be a non-violent man, how do you deal with this culture? What do you do with all the heads on spikes and all the tombstones? And then yeah, and the stick man burning and becoming the butterflies. And then there's Thorfinn on the beach, looking over and seeing his father. Ooh, there's so much going on. I'm excited, right? So yeah. So meanwhile, back in Farmland Saga, Einar looking over at Thorfinn being like, why are you so sullen? And he's like, well, my spider senses were tingling. I'm feeling angst is coming. Things are not good. And Thorfinn's like, well, yeah, he's like, I feel like Thorfinn doesn't know what to do. Thorfinn is pretty undecided. Thorfinn does not have a clear path forward. He mentally knows what he wants to do. He knows he wants to, like, promote this non-violence idea of peace and there not being war anymore, but he's like, I don't know what to do with that. He's like, I don't know where to go. He's like, I have no idea what to do with myself. He's like, Thorfinn, the thing about Thorfinn that's different than Einar is Einar, was fairly old when his mother and sister died. So he has a sense of, like, forming a home and having, like, a homestead and a life and cultivating, like, a day-to-day routine. Like, Einar was kind of pretty much adjusted to that. Thorfinn was never adjusted. Thorfinn was always on the move with Askeladd. They were always in battle. He doesn't have a sense of what is it like to settle down. Thorfinn has no clue what that is like. Whereas Einar kind of has a better understanding of it. But Thorfinn has no clue. So he's asking Einar, what is he going to do? He's like, what are you going to do once you're free? Where are you going to go? He's like, oh, that. Yeah, that idea. And then Kettle, of course, is like, when I get back, you're going to be free. You want to be retainers? He's like, I don't know. And this part is brought up that's very true. He's like, I've lived too long as a slave. He's like, I've lived as a slave so long, I can't make a decision now that I'm free to do what I want. That's the saddest thing about it, is that in Einar's case, he's like, I've been a slave so long that I don't know what to do with this freedom. What do I do with it? He's like, where do I go? He's like, I don't really have a home to go back to. I don't have a family to go back to. So maybe I will stay. It's like, that's kind of the sad thing about it. That the heartbreaking thing is, like, when you don't have a family or anything else to go to, it's kind of like, well, I guess I'll stay here. the thing that's the most sad is that Thorfinn is undecided. He has potentially a family to go back to. He has a sister and a mom. He has Leif. He has all these. I'm really hoping that Leif offers him an opportunity and an option. Because, yeah, Thorfinn's whole thing is he doesn't even have, like, you know, Einar's like, well, I could become a retainer. I could go back to my homeland. I could do this. Thorfinn doesn't even know what options are out there for him. For him, he doesn't even know. He's like, I guess I can go back to Iceland, but to what purpose? To what point? What's the point of me doing that? Right? So it's kind of sad that they have this freedom and they don't know what to do with it. And he's like, that's odd. And Thorfinn's like, would you consider staying here? He's like, I might eventually get to let Arnheid get free. Yeah, he's crushing so hard and it hurts. Oh God, it hurts so much. It's like, oh, Einar, sweetheart, you don't even know. You don't even know. And I like that Thorfinn's like, oh, so you're that in love with her? Thorfinn's like, we can't be shipped together anymore. It's like, don't worry. This episode will be... I like that Thorfinn becomes the wingman. He becomes the wingman bro for Einar, right? He doesn't want to be a third wheel anymore. He becomes like the total wingman. Again, I view Thorfinn in a very like asexual lens. So I view like Thorfinn does not really have any remote feelings towards having a relationship with someone, to my knowledge, as of yet. That could change. Who knows? But as of right now, he's just kind of like, I'm not interested in sex with anything, but I'll help you, bro. He's like, are you that in love with her? And Einar's like, don't. It's not like that. He says, it's just... And then he's about to say something. So I feel like maybe Einar, I think the thing of it is whether he's in love with her or not, that's the big question. If he's in love with her, then that's going to make Gardar showing up all the more heartbreaking because Einar is unrequited because she obviously loves her husband. But if he doesn't love her, he just wants her to be free because he thinks that's awful. She doesn't get the same rights as they do. It's like #feminism, good for you, Einar, for wanting her to have the same freedom that you have. But it's still sad because I do think that he does like her. It's like, it's kind of heartbreaking. It's like, man, I'm rooting for you. I was rooting for you the whole time. And I'm sure every manga reader's like, keep doing that. So then Snake shows up. I like Snake a lot. Snake is rather interesting because he's like, you're taking forever, Gramps. Snake is, when they're like, what's your relationship with the old man? I'm like, you know. No, everybody makes fun of me because here's the thing. It's not that I ship Snake and Sverkel because a lot of people are like, that's gross, he's so old. And I'm like, old people need loving too. But my thing is, one, I do it because it's hilarious because people get squirmy about it. But two, there is a definite bond between Sverkel and Snake. It is definitely a bond. Now, is it like a father-son bond? Yeah, you could say that. I just like doing the shipping thing because I think Snake would do it with anything that moves. But that's just me being contrary. So yeah, Snake definitely is tied to Sverkel in some way. Yeah, he ignores that whole, what's your relationship to Sverkel? He casually skirts around the edge real quick. And he's like, oh, I'm just watching the old man till I can take his book and inherit it and then go sell it and make some money. Bullshit. I'm like, there's something else there. You just don't want to say it because it'll make you seem vulnerable, Snake. There's something else there. He just doesn't want to talk about it. But whatever. And then the moment that he's like, oh, isn't the old man back yet? I was like, he's dead. I was fully expecting it to be red flag central. He's dead. He's passed on. It's going to start this whole chain reaction. And then, see, I thought the whole backstory, like, Sverkel was either going to be dead or, like, close to death. And then we were going to go back in time to the flashback to the redhead, Gardar, who I thought was Sverkel at the time. I was expecting a whole narrative, and not the narrative that I thought. But yeah, he goes... I like that he says, to the farm, and Snake takes off with the horse and makes them run. And then he sees the hoe and finds him there on the ground. Hang in there, Gramps. Hang in there. Again, I find the Edie and stuff with Thorfinn and the hoe tilling the field, I feel like there's going to be a major connection between Sverkel and Thorfinn established before Sverkel dies. I feel like there's going to be something established there. Like Sverkel's going to tell Thorfinn something about his past, something that connects the two of them together, and that Thorfinn is going to learn something from. I just feel like it's coming, but we just aren't there yet, right? Because he tries to pour himself a glass of water and it doesn't work. And then he said, I wanted to die on my farm, not in bed. So the idea that Sverkel wants to die out in the fields. He doesn't want to die away from his farm. It's really sad. The fact that Sverkel is just getting there and slowly dying is just, it's really, really sad. And that Snake and Arnheid are his caretakers, which it makes sense the mistress sent her to take care of him, because it's like a bunch of dudes probably can't do the job very well. And then Arnheid makes the giant meal for them all. Like, girl cooks. She makes lentils. She makes mashed potatoes. She makes like turnips. There's carrots. There's sausage. Like, she makes a spread. Girl is like, she is a charcuterie board away from being at everybody's party. And I love that they're like, oh my God. Like, they're all just so surprised. And they're like, oh, can we eat all this, Arnheid? And she's like, yeah, sure. Now there's like a whole nother layer of her, like, making them all the food and everything. There's a whole nother layer knowing that she had this husband she was away from the entire time. Oof. Because she appears to be like so not happy, but just calm and okay. And to know she's been dealing with this, the loss of her husband and from the OP, possibly a child, this entire time. That's just oof, oof, oof indeed. And so they all sit there, and she says, oh, I see none of you pray first. So yeah, so there's the idea that there's a little bit of, she's like, shouldn't you pray for your food first? Okay, no, never mind. We're good. And then Huckleberry's having me throw this toy all the time. I also love just how happy Thorfinn and them look in the background. Like, I love seeing Thorfinn with like these big anime eyes. We've seen him just like look absolutely miserable for an entire season, and the fact that we see him look remotely happy is worth taking a picture of. Like, come on. And then, of course, Sverkel's like, I'm not going to eat. He's like, I'm not going to eat. It's fine. I'll be okay. And it's like, no, you won't. It's like, you need to eat something. He's just avoiding feed. He's just slowly starving himself, right? Mm-hmm. And he won't do it. And I love that Snake is like, force feed him. I love Snake wants him to live. Snake wants him to be okay. So there's something there. There's something we don't know about Snake and Sverkel's relationship that I'm like, come on. You know something that we don't, and Snake doesn't want to tell. Snake doesn't want to tell us. Yeah, and he's like, oh, just feed him. He's like, and he teases him. He's like, you're going to be fed for a while. You just don't want people to think that you're being force-fed. Like, the way that he says it, too, is like, you got to eat this. Like, he's very sing-songy about it. And I like that Thorfinn laughed at that. He laughed. It was really cute. I was like, oh, we have happy Thorfinn. We have happy, pensive, learning about religion Thorfinn. I'm like, why, show? Why are you going to take this away from us? Why are you about to make Thorfinn's life sad again? Like, really be great if you didn't. Oh. And so then, yeah, then we cut to Arnheid and Einar outside. And I love that Arnheid and them talk about Sverkel and how he seems scary, but he's really not. Like, he really has a good heart. And of course, Sverkel can hear it all, right? And it's this idea that Sverkel realizes that they know how he really is, and he's just like, I like it. I like that they aren't insulting him in any way or talking bad about him. They're kind of actually like admiring the fact that he can be intimidating, but he really has like a teddy bear heart inside. They're actually complimenting him, and he just kind of sits there and hears it, right? It's good. And so then Thorfinn's about to go wash some things when he hears the two of them talking, and he decides to not be a third wheel, to be a wingman for his friend and let them have this moment. And she says, I felt like I was free again. And that's so, God, that hurts so much. Because it's like, even if you have moments like this, even if you have this fun dinner and everybody's laughing and having a good time, at the end of the day, they're not free. They're still slaves. These aren't the people that are their natural family. They're just thrust into this situation. And it's, at the end of the day, it's still sad. It's like, just heartbreaking, right? Absolutely heartbreaking. But yeah. And Einar's like, yeah, I know. He's like, I know what that's like. He's like, it did feel like that. And I'm very curious, like, if Gardar is going to be different than Einar or if they're going to be similar. I feel like Gardar, just from how Gardar and Einar so far, they both, like, when Einar was fighting the retainers, he was pretty serious and was like, had all this rage built up into him. He's like a bear, right? Like, Einar is like a bear. If you poke the bear, it's not good. But otherwise, he's a big, cuddly, cute thing. I wonder if Gardar is similar. If he's like a bear, that he's obviously, he seems like a loving husband, because otherwise, why would Arnheid go after him? But is he like Einar? It's gonna be really sad if he's exactly like Einar, and it's gonna be like, ugh, dude, you just, time was not on your side. And Thorfinn just staying there back in the back. So then Fox shows up. I really didn't want to see Fox again. From Kajalikar's farm. What a name. He escaped there 3 days ago. So he's been on the run for 3 days with a stab wound, and he's hungry. Yeah, he's not probably in a good mental state. Yeah, he's probably desperate. So a cornered man is a dangerous one indeed. And so then Snake sends him saying, I like that he says they'll get three horses if they go. If they capture him, they'll get 3 horses, and that's the incentive. Which I joked about it in the reaction, but I guess in all reality, horses are not hot commodities, and having your own is quite helpful, because otherwise we saw the retainers had to go borrow them. So having your own would eliminate a lot of problems. But Snake talks about how the Kajalkar guy treated his slaves poorly, almost kind of like he got what he deserved, sort of thing. Like, he treated his slaves poorly, so what else did he expect? But also what's important here is that he is reading the Bible, sitting there reading it, right? Reading the gospel, and you could see him doing it. That's so interesting. So Snake is not what he appears to be at all. He is very Ascladian in how he is lying about things. Because he says he doesn't like the book, doesn't like the Bible, and yet he is reading it in his spare time. And we've been seeing him read it constantly. Because it's the one thing, like, he clearly knows how to read. So if he knows how to read, he doesn't need to learn. So if he doesn't need to learn, he doesn't need to read the book in his spare time. He can just read it whenever Sverkel wants him to. So why does he read it in his spare time? Because he actually wants to read it. But he doesn't want to admit that to anybody, because that may make the impression of him seem different, right? The persona that he's putting on. And so, yeah, I like that he just stares out from the book and says he's a violent man and a skilled fighter. Okay, we should take precautions. So he's a skilled fighter. Yep, okay. So that's going to be interesting. Him interacting with Einar and Thorfinn is going to be very interesting. And Snake, right? So there's no telling what a cornered man will do. So this part here, like, my question was, I feel like that he was just lured. If that's him up next against the tree with the sword, and that was actually him the entire time, then Lizard and Badger and Fox are idiots. Major bakas. Because I thought that maybe it was all a distraction. He just, like, piled up a bunch of, like, boulders or something, threw the cloak over it, and put the sword up next to it to lure them into a false sense of security that it was him. But he left the sword there, and that seemed to be his only weapon when he left. So, no, they're just all idiots and were so loud and obnoxious that he woke up and went over and attacked them. I don't feel bad for Lizard, because him and Badger were arguing. They knew better. They should have been, not morons. They got what was coming to them. And then they managed to escape. God, I was just like, you guys are such idiots. Okay, but on the other hand, he had a different cloak on, so maybe it is a different... Let me see. Yeah, it shows him. What does it show him? He has a sword. Maybe it was a different sword. Maybe he took 2 with him. I don't know. And then we cut to Einar chopping the wood. Okay. And so he's like, Thorfinn, we got a lot of wood chopping. A lot of wood waiting here. Keep him moving. And then Thorfinn's listening. I love that. I love that he's listening to him talking. And Einar's like, come on, Thorfinn. And he's like, oh, yeah. And he's like, oh, I'll get that. Sorry, 1 second. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Einar's like, sure. Einar's such a good friend. He's like, there's wood everywhere. They've got like so many loads of wood to pile up, but he's like, whatever. You just keep listening to your Sunday gospel, Thorfinn. Go on. Go on. And Arnehe's like, what is he doing? And then he says that Snake is reading the Bible inside and Thorfinn is listening. Because, yeah, the old master can't, again, how Sverkel and Thorfinn are similar, Sverkel can't read himself. Well, neither can Thorfinn. When did Thorfinn learn to read? He didn't learn to read, right? So he can't read himself either. He's illiterate. So he's just learning for the first time by listening to Snake reading it out loud. I love just how earnest he looks. And she says, so Thorfinn is a Christian too. And Einar's like, no, but he says it's interesting. Yeah, that's the thing. He's like, Thorfinn's not necessarily Christian, but he's interested in what they're being said. So that's interesting too in itself, that Thorfinn, he is interested in the gospel. Not a full-fledged Christian, because I don't see Thorfinn as somebody to like follow a crowd. I don't see Thorfinn as somebody to get into like an organized religion. But the teachings themselves and what's being said, I feel like Thorfinn can take comfort in that, because a lot of the New Testament is basically preaching what Thorfinn just said his goals are, right? Because they talk about this. I love the verse that Snake says. I'm like, this is a great one to tie into this story. Because then Snake is reading, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, I like Snake's reading it out to him, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Saying that to Sverkel. Like reading him his last rites, right? So that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Now for Thorfinn, that's a pretty powerful thing, because you know, you can take that sons who's of your Father who's in heaven. I mean, the Father in this sense is referring to God, but Thorfinn could refer that to Thor's. To that, I mean, you could refer that in the idea of loving your enemy. You're loving your enemy and praying for them. That's a hard thing to do. That's a very hard thing to do. It is hard to want to forgive and love your enemy. That's hard, because it seems natural that you shouldn't, right? For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. And the lesson here is that, because at the end of the day, you should love your enemy. You should love anyone, regardless of whether you're your friend or your enemy, because at the end of the day, the sun is going to shine on everyone. Everyone is going to have a good day at some point, whether they are evil or good. The sun is going to shine upon them regardless of their status. It's going to send rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Yeah, so everyone is going to have both good and bad happen to them. It's just going to be that way. Nature is not prejudice. And in this case, they're saying, you know, the sun is going to shine on people regardless of their nature. It's not prejudice. The rain does not care what your morality is. It's going to still come one way or the other. And he says, for if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? It's easy to love people that are nice to you. It's easy to like people who are kind to you. That's easy. Anybody can do that. He's saying it's hard to love someone that hates you, because you don't get, it's like the idea is that when you think about it, you think that if I love someone that hates me, what reward do I get? But the reality is, what reward do you get by loving people that just love you alone? That's natural. There's, you know, what's special about that? What's rewarding about that? And I like that Thorfinn, that seems to strike a chord with him, right? Do not even tax collectors do the same. Like, you know, tax collectors go and collect money from people that are giving it to them. They just get what, it's like, it's not a gift. They were already getting it. So there's no present in that. But in loving your enemy, you may forge a relationship with them that you didn't expect, and that will yield something that you didn't think was even possible of being earned. So that would be rewarding, right? That's what he's saying there. And then if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Everybody greets their family. What's different than that? And he says, do not even the Gentiles do the same? Yeah. So it's basically saying it's easy to love people that love you back because nothing's gained. It's just natural. It's harder to love someone that doesn't like you because you're probably not going to get anything in return, but it may lead to something you didn't have before. It may lead to a relationship you didn't even consider being possible, and that's going to be the reward. So yeah, I could see Thorfinn taking that in and being like, okay, so I'm just ready for Canute to be like, I'm your enemy, you should hate me, and Thorfinn to be like, no, I don't hate you. He's gonna be like, I love you, Canute, and Canute's like, you know? I'm just waiting for Thorfinn to be like, I love you, and Canute like hisses back into the shadows with his dead father's head. Yeah, because that's kind of the antithesis of Canute right now. Canute is all about like everyone is your enemy. Everyone's your enemy. You should hate everybody, trust no one, only until you're on top can you do anything. And Thorfinn's just like, okay, so if I can be kind to those who have done, if I can be kind to those who try to do wrong to me, then I can possibly change their mindset or perception of me. Maybe do something different. I don't know. It seems like it's ringing a tune that Thorfinn has been wanting to hear from something. Therefore, you are to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Like, strive to be the best person you can be, right? And I love this snake, after reading this, is like, he just goes, he's like, good grief, that's ridiculous. I love that he says, he goes, Gramps, I'm sick of the gospel. That line, Gramps, I'm sick of the gospel. He says, let's read the first bit again. It's more interesting than this, at least. I'll be honest. Neon Genesis, back when I was reviewing that for this channel, it got me actually starting to reread. My great-grandmother had like a King James Bible, and so I've started to reread it. And I will admit, I could see why Snake would like the beginning. The Old Testament's got a lot of fire and brimstone, and lots of killing, actually. So I could see why Snake would like that part. I'm just getting around to the book of Samuel. That's probably my favorite book so far in the Old Testament, is the story of David and Saul. That's probably my favorite story in the whole Testament right now. It's great. And Jonathan, his male friend. Mm-hmm. I'm not going down that rabbit hole, but I can see why Snake would like the Old Testament. Yeah. And then he sees that Sverkel, and that look on his face when Sverkel tries to get off the bed is a look of concern. Like, Snake tries to pass off that he's not interested in helping. He's just like, I'm just watching this old man till he dies. Blah, blah, blah. He cares. We don't know why he cares, but it's not just for a book. There's something else to it, right? There's something else to it. And Sverkel just keeps saying, I need to go harvest the wheat. And I like that Snake's like, the wheat's already been harvested. It's like, and then he notices that Sverkel's, peed himself. He's like, all right, old man's peed himself. Let's go. And then he tells Thorfinn and Einar he's gone senile. He probably doesn't have much longer to live. And he's very, methodical when he says that. But he's very, he doesn't look them in the eye. He just keeps doing what he's doing. He's like, it's almost like Snake is steeling himself with resolve that this is going to happen. Like, he doesn't want Sverkel to die, but he realizes it's inevitable, and we just have to prepare for it. And it's so freaking sad. Ugh, it guts me. Because there's more there to it, right? There's more there. Because Einar and Thorfinn are like, well, what do you mean he's going to die? Like he farms every day. He goes fishing every day. What are you talking about? And Sverkel's like, and Snake goes, it's not going to happen all at once. But he's getting to where he can't move. And once you can't move, they lose all their strength. Once your legs go, it's not long after that, right? He's like, it won't be right away. And then Thorfinn's like, there's something I've been wondering. He's like, what is your relationship with the old master? The Thorfinn asks what we've all been wanting to know. He's like, did you guys have a history? And I could have made some shipping jokes, but I'm not going to make them. I'm going to let you guys get your own minds in the gutter. And Snake says, oh, what? It's nothing special. He's like, oh, and whenever Snake smiles and does this like little wave of his hand and he's like, oh, it's just this and this, he's lying. He's a liar. Whenever he waves his hand and like puts on a smile and says something, he's joking. There's more to it than that. He says it's nothing special because he's like, I'm just planning to inherit and sell that book once Gramps kicks the bucket. And he puts on that little cheesy smile like, yeah, believe me, I'm not emotionally crushed inside. And Thorfinn just looks at him like, I don't believe you. Like, there's more to it than that. And then he's like, get back to work. The sun's setting. The whole story's about to come to a crashing halt, right? And so Arnheid, whose hands have been like slowly, like she's been washing so much that they've like been rubbed raw. Like her hands are just raw, right? And she starts to like just like suck on them like the skin's cracking, right? That's when she sees Gardar. And Snake's like, oh, damn it, Lizard's dead. And she runs after him. And then seeing him like on the horseback, oh my gosh, that's such an epic shot. Like seeing him like stop on the horse up in the air with the sword in hand, looking like a knight. Looking like a big old knight. Yeah. And he's got like the hair all grown out. Yeah. Just like all the hair grown out. And it's all like dirty and everything. And see, her hands are all raw and everything, but she's been washing. It's not like she's not been tortured or anything. He says, Arnheid. And he says, I finally found you, my wife. And in that moment, like looking back at his face, like he stops the horse and he looks happy. He's like, I finally found you. Yeah. Oh my God. And that's the end of the episode. So yeah, oof. Oh, Einar, buddy. So I like that Thorfinn is getting a little dose of, he's been getting doses of religion throughout all this, listening to Snake read to Sverkel, listening to all that. And what's kind of interesting about this is that Thorfinn is hearing the gospel, but making his own rounded opinions about what he's hearing. And he's taking in what he hears and processing it in his own way without someone telling him what it means. Like he's processing it for himself, right? Because here's the deal. With Canute, back in season 1, he had Archibald, he had preachers around him interpreting it for him and telling him what it means. And Ragnar was telling him what it means. And so it was someone else putting their interpretation of the words and giving it a meaning and passing it on to Canute. And Canute kind of got fed up with it because he's like, well, what do you mean there's these trials? What do you mean there's this? How does that work? And Canute was not, the interpretation given to him was not working. And Canute, it caused him to get, like, organized religion caused Canute to have a field day and kind of just get turned off from the whole thing. Whereas Thorfinn is hearing this word and interpreting it for himself and just soaking it all in, right? Kind of like that situation. So it is different than Canute. I feel like Thorfinn is going to have a different response to the Bible than Canute did. I feel like religion is going to be a different means for Thorfinn in inspiring him than it was for Canute. Because Canute had this whole upbringing that had been surrounded by religion, but surrounded by perhaps not the best interpreters of it, and he kind of was just sort of dissuaded from the whole thing. Whereas Thorfinn's kind of engaging in it a little bit more organically and is letting it all soak in, and it's kind of hitting in a different way. And then if Olvar in the OP gets religious, then we have a whole nother thing. So that's fascinating. Fascinating. But yeah, so we have Gardar. We don't know what's going to happen with him. I'm hoping he's a nice guy. I don't know how this is going to work out with Snake, because Snake's like, shit, we got to kill him. And now there's Arnheid. And then Thorfinn and Einar, what are they going to do in all of this? And it's not going to be pretty, y'all. It's not going to be pretty. And oh, buddy. Oh, buddy. Oh, no. I don't know what we're going to do, but... So, yeah. So, yeah. I hope you all enjoyed this reaction. I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. But I'm excited for the next episode. I feel like we've gotten off to a good start with the second core, and we'll just see how it goes, right? So before I go, I want to give a special shout out to our people over on Patreon, especially those in our philanthropy tier. I have 3 tiers on Patreon. There's the first tier that's just $1 that you get access to our Discord, so you can talk about these shows with us, as well as vote in the polls for the next shows that I watch. There's going to be a bunch of polls coming up this summer, so lots of things to look forward to. And then in terms of that, there's also the $5 tier that gets all of those benefits, plus getting episodes a week ahead of time. And then finally, there is the philanthropy tier that gets all of the above, as well as if there's a tie on the poll, y'all get to break it, and you get special mention in videos like these. So these are the special patrons who go above and beyond, out of their way, to support me in what I love doing, to help me pay for streaming services, to subscriptions, to buying the anime and manga, and supporting the official release for things that I react to. So I'm really super grateful for the support of Edgar, for Anime Annie, for Truck, for Dana, for Shimoyama, for Arjo, for Be Happy, for Translucent Men, for Tyrone, Nameless Monster, as well as Kenny. And I think that's everybody, but thank you all so much for everything that you do. I really appreciate it. Y'all go above and beyond, and I'm very, very grateful. So all of my love, and thank you all so much. I'm excited to hear your comments down below. But yeah, Gardar. Was that his name for sure? Let's make sure we get that right? Make sure we get that right. I want to make sure that we got that name. Yeah, Gardar. Yep. And then poor Einar just being like, well, shit, she knows him. And dude, you just lucked out. So I'll see y'all next time very soon with more Vinland Saga. Bye.